we have the wrong picture. They handed me another big picture. And I said, that's not the guy I talked to either. And they said, oh gosh, somehow there's some confusion here. So they handed me like a binder that had like 6 pictures on a page. And I'm flipping through, and I don't know, page 3 or 4, I go, oh, that's the guy I talked to. And they looked at each other and they said, okay, yeah, that's Jay Sebring. So they were just trying to see if I was maybe making a story up or whatever. And so they began debriefing me on, you know, what did I see, what did I say, etc. And so that led me, I guess, into the investigation and prosecution. And I didn't really obviously have much detail, but I think the main thing that the prosecution was trying to do is they're going to try and take the murderers through a timeline that could take them to the scene at the time of the murders and the victims and paint a picture that brings them together at the same place at the same time. And as I said, when I drove through the gate, I looked very carefully for anything to drive over, and there was nothing there, and I could swear with complete certainty that I'd looked very carefully and there was nothing there. But in the morning when the maid Winifred Chapman arrived, the phone cables had been cut and draped across the driveway and across the gate. And so, and then I think they matched the striations on the cut phone cables to a pair of wire cutters that they found later in the investigation out at the Spawn Movie Ranch. And they matched the striations. But a defense attorney, I guess, could say, well, maybe the cable was cut the day before, or maybe it was cut that morning, or something like that. So I could just testify that when I left at about 8 o'clock, there were no phone cables cut. And when the bodies were discovered the next morning, or when the maid arrived the next morning, they were definitely draped across the driveway. And so that was the main piece of the puzzle that I could help the prosecution bring the timelines together in that way. So looking back on it now, 50 years later, 52 years later, and maybe what this might have meant to me or how it might have affected me, I do remember in the near term, certainly before we knew who had committed the murders, and we lived in a almost secluded cul-de-sac, just a couple miles away from the Benedict Canyon. So we didn't have like immediate neighbors, or it wasn't like a big, busy neighborhood. And so, you know, what had been a pretty relaxed upbringing, I don't think I ever owned a key to the front door of our house until about this time. We began locking the door. Never had a key. We always knew where the keys to the car were. The cars were always parked out on the street in the cul-de-sac, and the keys were always in the ignition. So it was a very naive or innocent kind of way to grow up. If I needed to get gas, I'd pull into the gas station across the street, and the guy would come out, put gas in my car, whatever, and I'd drive off. And once a month or so, he'd walk across the street and tell my dad how much money was owed for gas that month, and my dad would pay him. It was just a very relaxed, trusting. We didn't think about crime until this time, and things changed. When the dog barked, you paid a little bit of extra attention. Each of the kids got a key to the house. We were expected to lock the door when we left, and so there was a little bit of attention. I do remember being home one night, walking down the hallway. We had 4 of the boys' bedrooms, and the house was dark. I might have even been coming home all by myself, except for the dogs that were there. And I heard the dog bark or growl or whatever, and I thought, oh my gosh. You know, and it just made me think about things that I hadn't thought of before. But of course, we're 18 years old, and so we're invulnerable. So maybe it's a little bit more adventure, or maybe awareness, but not. I don't remember having a feeling of undue vulnerability or fear. And then in the near aftermath, I got involved in the investigation and in the trial a little bit. And so that occurred when I was about a year later. So I was a freshman at UCLA. I'd finished my freshman year at UCLA. And so some of my fraternity brothers would, I think it was Officer Ferguson was the guy that was a point of contact for me. So every once in a while, there'd be a joke about, oh, Officer Ferguson's on the line. They have some questions for you or something like that. So there was a little bit of lightheartedness, or maybe a gallows humor, or associated with it. But for some reason, just even my relatively cursory involvement, just it interested a lot of people. A lot of people wanted to hear the story, still do. And so over the years, I don't know, maybe it's at night, somebody's telling a story, somebody's talking about a crime, or somebody says, "Oh, Dennis, I thought you were a lawyer. You're not a lawyer. What was your first involvement with the law?" And then I would go, "Well, interestingly enough, my first involvement with the justice system was testifying at the Charles Manson murder trial." And that would always get people's imagination or get the conversation going or whatever. So I wouldn't say that any sense of fear or insecurity followed me. Maybe a little bit of sort of interest and notoriety. Obviously, I read all the books and happy to talk to anybody about it. I think if it was more stressful to me, if maybe I was closer to the victims, or maybe like Bill Garrettson or something, it would be so traumatic I wouldn't want to talk about it. But I think it's always been probably any good friend of mine or neighbor or friend would eventually hear about the connection. But I don't think that had any scars or any anxiety or tension for me. More sort of a point of interest.
When your father dropped the bike off that Wednesday, did he have a story? Who did he converse with? How did that go down? Do you remember that story by any chance?
I don't think he interfaced with anybody. That may be why the wrong color bike got dropped off. He just went up there, didn't see anybody, put the bike in the garage, drove off.
What became of the two bikes, the one on Wednesday and Friday? Do you remember that? Was it any of them kind of saved or entered into any kind of evidence, anything like that?
No. What would have happened to the one that I picked up? It would have gone into the van, and we had like bungee cords and hooks. So as I picked up the van, picked up the bicycle and put it in the van, we would strap it to the side of the inside of the van. The seats were generally removed, and so it would be bungee cord to the side, and then whenever the van went back to the bike shop, then somebody would go take the bicycle out and put it, probably make sure it was clean and everything, and put it back on the showroom floor. And so I believe I drove straight to Janice's that Saturday morning. So that bike was probably still in the van and ended up back out of the bike shop sometime later on Saturday. As far as the bike that had been purchased, I have no idea what happened to that. It was fully paid for, and it would have become the property of the family of the victims.
Do you think he could have missed that noise?
I've always wondered about Bill Garrettson. Obviously, everybody has. How could a guy have been right there on the property and not have seen or heard, or at least heard, what was going on? Myself personally, obviously, I'm very familiar with the cul-de-sac, the gate, the driveway, the garage, the gate to the front lawn, the front porch, and everything else. But I, until seeing pictures later, didn't really have a feeling for, obviously you could see it was a ranch style house, and it kind of rambled along. But then as it sort of bent around, and now there's a swimming pool, and at the far side of the swimming pool, a guest house or caretaker house. I wasn't even aware of what that was out there. I didn't know if that was 300 feet away or 100 feet away. So I didn't really have a feeling for that. It just seemed odd or unlikely that there would be gunshots or screams, and that they were heard maybe by a neighbor and by some neighbors as the sound travels through the canyons some distance away, that they would hear, but somebody right there on the property wouldn't hear. Now the property does wrap around, so it wasn't like he was like right across from the front door, from the front lawn. So obviously it's perplexed everybody over the years of how he didn't hear it. But I think it's very possible. I guess I would also have the question of, if he didn't hear it, probably because he was playing music loudly. I think that that was the case. But then why wouldn't the murderers have seen lights on, music, loud music, coming from another guest house on the property, and either trying to make sure there was no witness, or maybe just an increase in what was already a killing spree? It just seems odd that they didn't notice him and he didn't notice them. I think that's probably one of the big mysteries. The other big mysteries, there were so many other murders at around that same time, and I'm not sure I have these details right, but I do remember I went to Uni High for summer school. I also I went to Loyola High School in Los Angeles for high school. But for summer school, I picked up some classes that we didn't really have at my school, and one of them was biology lab class. And I took that at Uni High, University High School near UCLA. And my microscope partner was Marina Habe, beautiful, beautiful young woman. You know, I never really spent the time to go back and connect all those dots, but that would certainly haunt me, that I spent, 6 weeks of a summer sitting right next to somebody every day. Beautiful person. So there were just a lot of elements of this that were unsettling, other than just these prominent murders, these 2 nights apart. There was a lot of other creepy stories. Yeah, the day of the trial, and so I'm not sure we all testified or completed our testimony that first day. I did, but and we all sat there on the either adjacent chairs or on a long bench together. And as I recall, we were together before that. Either I don't remember if it was some days before that, and we were being maybe prepped a little bit for our testimony, what to expect, or maybe we were in a room together that was like a visitor room or a witness room that wasn't in the hallway ready to be called into the court, but maybe it was like a lounge that you could be, so you could arrive an hour early and have a place to sit or have a coffee or water before going out to the sort of the hallway witness benches. And I do remember there was a guy, there's kind of heard a little scuffle at the end of the hallway, and it was like a sheriff or bailiff or something like that said, no, sir, you can't come here. And so bad, he was holding some guy back. And he was a photographer, and he had kind of reached around the corner and took a picture down the hallway, or kind of down across the hallway. So when I went into court, the direct was Vince Bugliosi, who was the DA. And then, and that went pretty straightforward. A pretty matter of fact, there was just some points he wanted to make about no cables were cut at that time and cables were cut later, what time to arrive and leave. And it was a pretty straightforward statement of fact. Didn't take much time at all. And then the cross-examination was this well-known obstructionist attorney, Irving Kanarick. And it seemed like you couldn't say one sentence without him sort of parsing it apart. Like, so you said that Jay Sebring acted normal in your interface. Like, what do you mean by normal? And I said, well, he didn't seem excited. He didn't seem nervous. He didn't seem twitching. He didn't seem stuttering. He didn't, it completely, without comment, uneventful. And so he had to tear every sentence apart. And he was, well, no, what you're saying that he only appeared normal as far as you saw. And I said, well, how could he have appeared any more normal than how he appeared to me? Obviously, it was a little bit kind of frustrating, and maybe I came across as being a little bit insolent. Because you're sitting there on a witness stand, not that far away, maybe 20 feet away, is Charles Manson giving me the stink eye. And I said, I kind of felt like Huck Finn sitting across from Injun Joe in the courtroom or whatever. It was a very unsettling kind kind of interface, visual interface there. Just knowing what this man and his family had been capable of doing. And then after this somewhat frustrating and nonsensical cross-examination, then I think Steve Tate came back for the redirect or the rehab. Pretty straightforward, just reiterate the facts, clean them up, and I was dismissed. And so I remember it was sort of the end of the day. And they'd sent me some money to pay for my parking, like 50 cents or something like that to park. So I had to park a few blocks away. I had a little 1968 Volkswagen Bug Beetle. And so now I'm walking from the courthouse to where I had parked that morning. And as I'm stopped waiting for a light to change to cross the street, I noticed that there's a box of newspapers. And that was very common. Many intersections would have a box, and you would put your nickel or dime in or whatever it was for the evening edition, the afternoon edition of the LA Times. You put your money in, you open up the box, supposed to take out one newspaper. I guess if I thought about it, I could have grabbed 3 or 4. And so I grabbed the newspaper because I wanted to read the news, and there, front page above the fold, Los Angeles Times, is a picture of me. And it was, that picture is still around, me and the other witnesses. And as I'm looking at this newspaper and looking at myself, I hear this hissing sound. And I'm like looking around. I'm not sure where this is coming from. And then I look over, and across the street is about 8 or 9 members of the family wearing the hippie clothing. But they were like looking at the LA Times, my picture in the LA Times, pointing across the street at me and giving me the evil stink eye and hissing at me. The light turns green, and I just walk to my car, only to drive to my home on a somewhat deserted cul-de-sac up Benedict Canyon, about 2 miles away from the murder scene. So there were some unsettling moments there that definitely stuck with me. But probably more of interest over the years than anxiety or torment.